is it that some of us can be in a relationship with a narcissistic person for years and never realize it? At what point do the red flags in the beginning of the relationship become a full-blown problem that we are blind to? Welcome to Looking Behind the Mirror, where we explore narcissism and take our lives back as we make sense out of nonsense. As a quick disclaimer, everything I say is based on my opinions and my personal experiences. I'm not a professional, and if you're really struggling, I encourage you to seek professional help. I am providing links below for you. I was recently speaking with someone that brought this subject up, and it made me wonder, why is it that sometimes it can take so long to see the things that are right in front of your face? With pathologically narcissistic people, they are always manipulating you, and they are never really being genuine. So it really becomes a question of how long you fall for their act, for their manipulations, and why you do this. I myself am guilty of being blind to this for years and then repeating the same mistakes. I think some of us have this idea in our head that in the beginning of the relationship there are certain red flags, and there are. But then at some point, the narcissist, quote, shows his or her true self and the relationship falls apart. That's not necessarily how it goes. These relationships can last for a very long time, even indefinitely. The abuse victim may never realize that they are with someone that's disrespecting them and abusing them and not treating them in the way that they deserve to be treated. The relationship doesn't always necessarily end in a ball of flames. In order to identify this pattern within ourselves, I think it's first important to recognize what it is that can make us vulnerable to this. Narcissistic individuals tend to be more successful with people who are vulnerable, and this vulnerability can present in many different ways. Narcissists can take advantage of people that are simply lonely, that are looking for companionship. If all they have to do is show a little attention and show an interest in this person, somebody that's particularly lonely will see what they want to see, will believe what they want to believe, and will be much more likely to trust a narcissistic individual a little too quickly. Narcissists are also more successful with people that tend to blame themselves for all the problems in a relationship. And this habit often starts to form in childhood. If we are always taught that everything is up to us, that everything is our fault, that we are responsible for fixing our own problems and everyone else's, as we grow into adulthood, we can become very vulnerable to somebody with the opposite mentality, to somebody that views others as responsible for all of their problems. And of course, somebody with low self-esteem is also very susceptible to narcissistic manipulation. And when we talk about low self-esteem, I don't think people realize that people with low self-esteem don't necessarily realize that they have low self-esteem. If you have always had a low feeling of self-worth, that's the only way you've ever felt about yourself. So you may not have anything to compare it to, and you may not visualize yourself as somebody with low self-esteem if you don't really understand what that means. I could probably do a whole video on that topic by itself, but somebody with low self-esteem is basically somebody that carries a lot of unwarranted shame around with them. Somebody that feels like they deserve the bad treatment that they receive. Somebody that doesn't feel like they really have the right to ask others for things or to be a bother to people. Another trait that narcissists can take advantage of is simply naivety. If it's just never occurred to you that there are people like this out in the world, you're going to be a lot quicker to trust somebody that seems trustworthy, that seems likable, that seems to be a good friend. Pathological narcissism can be quite shocking in some ways when you see the full scope of what these people are capable of. Not all of us are aware that this is even possible. Not all of us are aware that there are people among us that think this way. So of course, if you don't realize it's possible, you're going to be much more susceptible to falling for it. Another trait that may make you susceptible to narcissism is neediness. And neediness can be emotional, or it could be for physical things like financial needs, or just going back to vulnerability. If you're in a vulnerable place in your life and you really need somebody's help to get by, maybe a single mother, or maybe somebody that has recently gone through a lot of significant loss. Narcissists have a lot more success with people who are more afraid to lose the people that they have in their lives. If you feel too great of a need for the people around you to the point where you're willing to put up with mistreatment and disrespect, you're going to be more susceptible to turning a blind eye to that kind of behavior. And whether or not you start off on that road, if you spend too much time with a narcissist, it's very likely that you may become dependent, which will make you even more vulnerable. Maybe if you have children with a narcissist, or you become financially dependent, or maybe socially dependent. Maybe you've moved somewhere where the narcissist is the only person that you know and you have no other social network besides this person. And it just feels like too great of a loss and too great of a risk to try to go out on your own. People that fall into this trap tend to be people that feel too much responsibility for the people around them and feel too much responsibility for the relationship. If when problems arise, you feel like it's all on your shoulders, like you're the one that needs to bridge the gap, you're the one that needs to put all the effort in. If that's a way that you just naturally look at life, you're going to be less likely to see something wrong with that picture when your partner expects you to do all the work. You may not even look at it that way because it feels so reasonable and normal to you for you to be the one bending over backwards trying to communicate. You may also be somebody that puts more trust in other people than you do yourself. This goes back to low self-esteem and a low sense of self-worth, which leads to a low sense of trust in yourself and a habit of invalidating yourself. If you don't have the confidence to believe in your own experience and in your own feelings, you're going to be a lot more likely to lean on the opinions of others. And if you're with a narcissistic individual, you're probably with someone that's all too happy to tell you how you feel and to tell you how things are and to tell you all the things you're doing wrong. If you don't have the confidence to stand up and say, no, that's not right, that's not fair, it's going to be a lot easier for narcissistic individuals to walk all over you and to convince you to take the blame for all the problems. And of course, for a lot of us, we're with somebody that means a lot to us. The narcissist is somebody that we've possibly devoted our life to, somebody that we're in love with, someone we trust, someone we've built all our hopes and dreams around. And recognizing that this person is pathological, is abusive, and does not care about us or the relationship is just too painful. It's not easy to get to a point in our life where we're ready to really accept that and let that in. So with all these ways that we can be vulnerable to this, how does it affect our perspective when we're dealing with a narcissistic individual? I have some examples of how one situation can look completely different to you depending on your vulnerability and your perspective. The biggest one is if your partner is yelling at you or criticizing you, demeaning you, and is always complaining about the way you do things and nothing ever seems good enough. You can look at this two different ways. If somebody is mean to you and is insulting you and criticizing you, you can either see that something is wrong with them and something is wrong with the way they are treating you, or you can look at it as something that's wrong with you, that you are so terribly flawed and awful that your partner can't help but yell and criticize you. Of course, this is a very important lesson to learn, that it is never okay for our partner or anyone close to us in our lives to be yelling at us and criticizing us. Of course, all of us lose our cool sometimes and all of us say things we don't mean, but it's not okay and it's never okay. When somebody hurts our feelings with criticisms and insults and losing their temper, they should apologize. And they should acknowledge that it wasn't right for them to lose their temper that way. Being assaulted with words is never justified, especially if we're trying to make it right, especially if we're trying to apologize and we're trying to bridge the gap. It's never okay to be the subject of somebody's uncontrolled rage. There's never anything that you did to deserve that. Another situation with two different perspectives is when we're trying to communicate with somebody and they refuse to understand what we're saying. These can be the simplest concepts, but we can explain and explain and explain, and they just cannot seem to understand what we're saying, and they become more agitated and angry, and they blame us for our inability to explain things correctly. This is something that happens a lot with narcissistic individuals, and really it's just a manipulation tactic, it's just a distraction, and frankly I think some of them do this just to alleviate their own boredom. But if you find that you are explaining and explaining and explaining something to someone that just refuses to understand, you can look at it as either They just do not have the mental capacity to understand what you're saying, or they are purposefully trying to frustrate you and keep you explaining to keep you the one that's upset and a little off kilter. Or you can blame yourself and just assume that you must not be explaining things correctly. Grown adults with reasonable amounts of intelligence should be able to understand what you're telling them the first time you tell them. And if they don't understand, they should be able to ask concise questions that you can then answer that will clear up any misunderstandings that you have. Someone that's rigidly dedicated to misunderstanding what you say is usually perfectly capable of doing so if they wanted to. Another behavior that we may tend to overlook is when a narcissist is being cruel and callous and insensitive. When a narcissist is hurting our feelings, but we're in a close relationship with this person, we trust this person, and we believe that this person loves us and cares about us, we can tend to assume that the narcissist doesn't know that they're hurting us, that they don't understand that what they're saying and doing is hurting us. And this is a really dangerous road to go down because we can turn a blind eye and excuse their behavior indefinitely if we just keep pretending that they don't understand. Grown adults with a reasonable amount of intelligence should know when they're hurting your feelings. And it should be even more obvious if you have actually told them that they are hurting your feelings. If somebody repeatedly hurts your feelings after you've tried to explain to them that they are hurting your feelings, that person doesn't care that they're hurting your feelings. And that takes me into another reality that we can ignore, which is when our partner simply does not care about our feelings or the relationship. We can spend years assuming that they care because they're supposed to care. They've probably told us that they care. They may even think that they care. And it can seem unconscionable to be in a committed relationship with someone that we love and care for very much, all the while they do not care and never have. That can be really, really hard to wrap our minds around and even harder to accept. But life doesn't come with the guarantees that a lot of us like to pretend it does. Just because somebody is supposed to care doesn't mean that they do. And when somebody repeatedly behaves in a way that demonstrates that they do not care about your feelings and they do not care about the things that can help the relationship, we need to be willing to look at things for what they are and willing to acknowledge the reality that some people just simply don't care. And the people that simply don't care may possibly be the people that are in your life. Another thing we may overlook with a narcissistic individual is constant bad luck. This doesn't apply to all narcissists, but a lot of narcissists seem to have endless strings of bad luck where people are constantly betraying them and they're constantly in all these horrible situations that are never any of their fault. I mean, it's quite possible that sometimes they really do have bad luck, but narcissists in general seem to have a little bit too much bad luck. And there's a shift that can occur when we start to see the truth, when we go from looking at the narcissist as somebody that's been wronged and betrayed and has had bad luck, to realizing that this person has sabotaged their own life repeatedly and maybe are now doing the same thing with you. So in order to ensure that we are not somebody that's going to spend years with a narcissistic and or abusive individual, there are some things that we have to understand. First and foremost is that you are not responsible for somebody else's feelings. You are not responsible for somebody else's anger, no matter what you've done. You're not responsible for making somebody else happy, and it goes both ways. You are responsible for your own feelings. You are responsible for the way that you emotionally react to the people in your life. When we confuse these boundaries, we create an inappropriate amount of responsibility in ourselves for the way that the people around us feel. And when somebody is abusing us, we can tend to take on the responsibility for that as well. Another thing that we have to understand is that we are not obligated to be perfect. We are allowed to make mistakes. We're allowed to have misjudgments. We're even allowed to hurt each other's feelings every now and then because we're human beings. Narcissistic individuals don't allow for any imperfections, and they will punish you until the end of time for any slip-ups that you make. Narcissists will treat you as though you are some kind of criminal every time that you make a mistake on accident. All the while, narcissists are purposefully hurting the people in their lives. It's important to understand when you're in the midst of a narcissistic relationship and you're being criticized and you're being shamed for the mistakes you've made. It's important to understand that you are allowed to make those mistakes, and that the mistakes you make in your life don't make you a bad person, and that nobody has the right to shame you and make you feel less than just because of things that you've done in your life that you're trying to get past now. Your imperfections don't define who you are, and they don't define your worth. Another thing that you must understand is that you deserve respect, no matter what. If you're in a personal relationship with someone, you deserve that person's respect. Respect is not something that you need to jump through hoops in order to earn, and love is not something that you need to jump through hoops in order to earn. Somebody that cares about you will love and respect you just because of who you are. This isn't something that you have to chase. You already deserve love and respect just the way you are, just because of who you are. Also, it is not your job to prove your intentions to other people. If you are trustworthy, then time will show that. It's not your job to prove to other people that you're trustworthy. It's not your job to prove to other people that you really do love and care about them. This is a really common manipulation tactic where a narcissist will accuse you of thoughts and intentions and feelings that you don't have and keep you running on this hamster wheel of trying to prove to them that you have good intentions and that you are trustworthy. Nobody should ever have to do this in a healthy personal relationship. Healthy relationships are built on mutual trust, and mutual trust does not require constant reinforcement and constant reminders and constant evidence that we are who we say we are. And of course, in a healthy relationship, both people need to try. When there are arguments or misunderstandings or unpleasantness or disappointments, both people are obligated to try to understand each other and communicate and fix the problems together. It isn't always up to one person, and the only time that it is up to one person is when that one person is an abusive narcissist. When one person refuses to take any accountability for the relationship, and when one person is the one that is abusive and manipulative, that's the only time that one person needs to put in more effort than the other. I hope this helps. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and comment below any ideas you have for me for future videos. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you like this video and would like to see more like it in the future. Until next time, thanks. Bye.